With Team of the Season just around the corner, if you guys need FIFA 23 coins, make sure you check out MMOXP.com. Their link is down in the description. They're fast, cheap and reliable, and if you use my code Rema, you can get yourself a nice 5% discount. So what's up guys, my name's Ash and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, I've got some custom tactics and player instructions for probably one of the new most popular formations in the game, this being the 3-4-2-1. Now it attacks quite similarly to the 4-3-2-1, but you do have that extra width because of the left mid and right mid, and one of the added bonuses with this formation is that the right mid and left mid can come back to make it a back five in defense, so you can be really good in attack and defense at the same time. So it's a super good formation and I hope you guys do like this video. But yeah guys, let's get right into today's video. Okay guys, so starting off with the custom tactics, for the defensive style I like to have this on balance. Now the reason we have this on balance is because it is the most controlled form of defense, where you're able to press when you need to press, but then when when you want to be a bit more conservative and drop off, you're also able to do that. So it gives you the greatest control over your defense, which is why I do suggest using it. Now moving on to the defensive width, because I said this can defend in a back five, you can get away with using a lower width. Now in other formations I will use like a width of 40 or even higher, but because we've got like a back five when we are defending, we can afford to make that width a little bit lower because we have more players, which means it's already naturally a little bit wider, if that makes sense. Now moving on to the depth, I like to have this on 55. The reason for this is we're not going to get pinned back because we don't have a super low defensive line, and then we're not also going to get through-balled as much because the defensive line isn't really high either. So it's a very nice balanced defensive line, and it's flexible with how we can defend. Now moving on to the build-up play guys, I suggest having this on balance. The reason we have this on balance is because it is the most suited for all types of FIFA 23 gameplay you might experience. Now a lot of you guys that play FIFA a lot will understand that FIFA 23 has very inconsistent gameplay. Sometimes it can be fast gameplay, other times it can be slow gameplay, so it's very varied on what you might experience. So balance is the most suited for all of these, because you can't use something like fast build-up if the gameplay is super slow, because you can't keep up with the movements. It's just not possible. So balance is definitely the best option in my opinion. Now moving on to chance creation guys, I suggest using direct passing. This is because it is the most meta option in the game, where your attackers will bunch up against the defenders, so you're able to do those really overpowered isolation plays. Players also make extra movements in the box, so you can do that extra pass which will guarantee you the goal, which other tactics will not offer you. Now if you don't like direct passing, I would suggest something like forward runs. This will commit your team very far into your opponent's half, but just beware, if you do use this and you lose the ball, you can get counter-attacked very easily. So it is a risk, and that is why I suggest direct passing. Now moving on to the attacking width, because this is like a wider formation with the left mid and right mid, you kind of want to use a higher width than you would use in like a really narrow formation, but you also don't want to make the width too high, otherwise your players feel too spread out, if that makes sense, because we still have some centre forwards, so we want the width to be nice and balanced, where we don't want it to be too narrow and we don't want it to be too wide either. 47 is kind of like a sweet spot for me, but you can change that if you like. Now moving on to players in box, we have this on 5 because it's bang in the middle, so we do get some players into the box, so we can score those chances, but we don't overcommit the entire team to the point where if we lose the ball we're in deep trouble. So 5 is probably the best bet that I would use anyway. Now moving on to corners and free kicks, these are both on 1 because there is a corner kick routine that I use which requires both of these to be on 1. Now moving on to the player instructions guys, in the striker position I suggest using a nice well-rounded striker. This is somebody that can do a bit of everything. So you're going to want somebody with a decent weak foot so they can shoot on either side. You're going to want somebody with decent dribbling ability, decent shooting ability and decent passing ability. You're not going to want to go for a super one-dimensional player, otherwise it restricts how you have to play, because they can only do certain things. So I suggest going for a nice well-rounded player that can do a bit of everything. Now moving on to the two forwards guys, you're going to want to use like good winger style players in my opinion. These are players with good pace, good dribbling stats, maybe like the 5-star skill moves, players that can shoot and cross, basically do a bit of everything in attack. You're not going to want to use somebody that is super clunky or somebody that has no creative ability, otherwise you're going to struggle to create those chances. Now moving on to the left mid and right mid, also known as like the right wing back and left wing back in this formation, you're going to want to use players that are good in attack, players that are fast, maybe have have that physical if possible, but the defensive stats aren't too important because we already have like 3 centre backs. These are mainly here to like cover those wide areas. So if you can get like good defensive stats on these players, that is an added bonus, but just make sure that they're decent in attack, otherwise you're going to struggle to go forward. So yeah, just go for like really good attacking players, and if you can get their good defensive stats, then that is also an added bonus, but it's nothing to worry about if you can't, because for example I'm using Chiesa on this side who's got pretty terrible defensive stats, but Roberto Carlos on this side who's got good defensive stats. It's kind of like whatever you want to use in these 2 wide positions. Now moving on to the centre mids, I like to go for a balance between the 2, where my left centre mid is a more defensive minded player. This is somebody that is going to stay back, break up the play and add defensive support for us. And then in the right centre mid spot, I like to go for a more box to box style midfielder. This is just to keep the midfield nice and balanced, where we don't have 2 attacking midfielders and 2 defensive midfielders, because it causes a really bad imbalance and you're going to struggle to win those games. Now moving on to the 3 centre backs, these just need to be as good as you can possibly get them. If you want, you can use like a fullback in this position, as long as they have like decent physical, decent height and decent awareness, things like that. So Cafu actually works quite well in the centre back role, but maybe somebody like Zanetti, who is really small and lacks the physicality, would be pretty bad, because they're not going to win headers and things like that. So just make sure your 3 centre backs are as good as you can get them. There's not too much to say about them. Now moving on to the player instructions, guys. On the striker, I just have him on stay central, and then I leave everything else alone. We have him on stay central because we need him to be in those central positions where the striker should be. We don't want him drifting off wide, as we've already got like enough wider players in this formation. We need him to be in the striker position, so he's always there to finish off the chances. Now some people like to have this player on getting behind, but I prefer to have him on mixed attack, because it makes your attack a lot less one-dimensional. Because if you have him on getting behind, you're limited to always just playing this guy in behind, and it makes you play a certain way all the time, which is not always the best option. Having him on mixed attack allows him to link up the play sometimes, and maybe even play the other forwards in behind, so you just get a lot more out of your striker on mixed attack. Now moving on to both forwards, the left forward and the right forward, we have them on stay central and getting behind. We have them on stay central because we want them to get into those pockets of space which are really difficult to mark. If we have them drifting out wide, they're not really much of a goal threat, because they're not really near the goal, they're not really a threat out wide. So we want them to stay central, so they're always looking to make those runs and always looking to break through that defensive line in that narrow manner to get us the best chances. We also have them on getting behind, so they do always look to make those incisive runs through the defensive line and get us as many chances as possible. This is why I said to keep the striker on mixed attack, because sometimes he can sit a little bit deeper and then play one of these 2 forwards in and make the run to get the return ball, things like that. It just works really nicely. Now moving on to the left mid and the right mid, we have them on comeback on defense and getting behind. We have them on comeback on defense, so when we lose the ball, they're going to come back to make this a back 5. So in my case, Roberto Carlos would be the left wing back and Chiesa would be the right wing back. So we have the back 5 to make us as defensively sound as possible, and it works very well. We also have them on getting behind, so they're always looking to make runs out wide down the wing to give us the most chances possible. It's super useful to have them on this, because otherwise they can be very static in those wider positions. Now moving on to the left centre mid, the more defensive minded player, we have him on stay back while attacking and cover centre. We have him on stay back because we don't want this player to go forward. He is a more defensive minded player, so we want him to stay back, and we have him on cover centre, so he does cover those central areas. It's important that we have at least one person covering the central areas. Now moving on to the right centre mid, the more box-to-box style player, we have him on default settings and cover centre. We have him on default settings because he is a box-to-box player, so we don't really want to restrict him. We want him to be able to do a bit of everything, so we just let him do what he wants. And then we have him on cover centre, so like Jorginho, he does cover those central areas when we don't have the ball. As for the 3 centre-backs and the goalkeeper, I do not touch them. I completely leave them alone. But yeah, guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 3-4-2-1. If you guys have enjoyed or found this useful, please be sure to drop this a thumbs up. Also subscribe to the channel if you are new, so you never miss out on any videos like this one, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you are notified when a video is posted. And with all that aside, guys, hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.